Hey folks, it's Tom Bin again. We're making masks today. Today we're making a version 3 3-layer 3-ply mask. We're making it out of 2 plies of the olive green cotton here and 1 ply of this gray blue cotton. You'll see I'm using the cardboard template that I made off of the PDF file that you can download from our website, and just making little notches where there's V notches on the pattern so I can line up your parts for assembly. Since this is a 3-ply mask, we're basting the 2 layers of the inside of the mask together so that they can be treated after this point as 1 ply of fabric. So the lining is 2 layers of the olive green fabric, and we're basting around the edges so that they can be dealt with as 1 ply of fabric from this point on. So basting is just sewing around the edges. This can be a pretty quick and dirty stitch. You're just locating these pieces on top of each other so that, again, they can be dealt with as a single ply from this point forward. Now I'm going to do the basic, the 1 seam assembly that goes across your cheeks, across your chin, and up the other cheek on the other side, the main seam of the version 3 mask. You want to line up your stitch line, not the cut edge of the fabric, but where you're going to stitch, which is in this case a 3/8 inch or 10 millimeter seam allowance, using those notches on the cut edges of the fabric to line everything up so you're in the right place. So that's the main seam, and now you're going to do the dart seam for the nose. On this mask there's a dart at your nose, goes across out from the bridge of your nose. So that's the basic shape of the mask there. I'm now going to attach the pre-assembled ear loops and neck strap assembly. This is shown on a different video of how to set this up so you're ready to go with these. You'll notice also I'm paying attention to which way the seam allowance on that main seam falls. And what I want to do there is keep the seam allowances from bunching up too much and creating big thicknesses that are hard to sew through. So on the lining I'm felling the seam allowance one direction, and on the shell I'm going to fill that seam allowance the opposite direction so that the plies of fabric don't get too thick. So that was on stitching the ear loop neck strap assembly down on one side, and here we are doing it on the other side. Again, you see I'm taking note of which way the seam allowance of the main seam falls. Now I'm going to do that same assembly here, the main seam and nose dart with the blue-gray shell fabric. Again, lining things up at the stitch value, not the cut edge value, which is why you see the little triangle of fabric at the end of the seam there, because I'm not lining it up to the cut edge of the fabric, I'm lining it up to the stitch value. Now I'm sewing the nose dart, the little seam that goes out from the bridge of your nose. Back tacking at the beginning and ends of all my seams. So again, there's the basic mask shape, and there's your lining. So I'm going to right side out the outer shell, the blue-gray fabric here, and then I'm going to insert it into the lining assembly, and I'm going to make sure the nose dart is lined up, and then I'm going to start sewing at the first notch to one side of the nose dart, and I'm going to go down the sides, taking care to back tack over the ear loop neck strap assembly. Now I'm sewing the seam that goes under your chin, so this is the under the chin join seam. When I get to that corner, I turn, I make sure my ear loop neck strap assembly are included in that seam, and I'm not tacking over them where I don't want to be. And then you see again, I'm taking those seam allowances and making sure the lining and the shell have seam allowances that fall in opposite direction. It doesn't really matter which way those seam allowances fall, as long as they're opposed to each other and not on top of each other, adding to additional thickness. So you see there's a gap at the top by the nose dart, leaving an opening for you to right side out the entire assembly. Pull your ear loops don't pull them too hard, but pull the ear loops and neck strap so you can right side out the mask. And that's basically it. That's your mask there. Now to sew off the opening that you left at the top to right side everything out, what we do in the factory is that we use the pre-cut piece of grosgrain or herringbone tape that the flexible nose piece slips into. We use that stitching to hold the final assembly together and to close off the opening. If you want, you can just tack that down as a separate stitch and then come back and add the tape for the nose bridge piece as a separate step, and that's fine to do. We've found that once we get making these, we can make them faster by closing the mask off by sewing the nose bridge piece into place. Again, this is probably the most important seam to make sure that nose dart seam, that the seam allowances for the lining and the shell of the nose dart seams are falling in opposing directions so that they're not on top of each other. It's kind of a big lump to sew across anyway, and it will be an even bigger lump if you don't oppose your seam allowances in that final step. If that doesn't make sense, wait until you're there dealing with it, and when you finally see it, you'll go, oh yeah, it'd be good if the seam allowances are not on top of each other. There's the basic assembled mask. You want to trim your seams so that they're tidy, and at this point you would slip the flexible nose bridge piece into the tape holder, and there you go. The mask is done. Thanks for your time, and keep making great masks, okay? Thanks.